Hi, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of Hobbies and Chat. If you're new here, my name is Jessica, and you guys, I think I've finally found my latest obsession. So I'm proud to present my trial and error with sculpting clay pottery pieces, while we talk about some other things that have been on my mind recently. I will have all of the products that I used linked in the description so that you can recreate this at home. So I got this ginormous tub of air dry clay off of Amazon. They did not have the smaller options. Some of the tools that I use to sculpt the clay, I've picked up from around the house, like they're just random tools. As always, I pulled a lot of my inspiration from Pinterest. So my goal is to start off with 4 ideas. So I have 2 trinket trays. I want to make an incense holder and a pasta spoon rest. I love when clay pieces look like real food. I think that's such a funny idea. When you're starting to sculpt your clay, the first thing you should do is create a clay mixture with water. So you'll do equal parts, mix them together, and it'll create a slurry. So it'll be a little bit chunky, but you'll need this to paste in any cracks or seal your pieces together. I'm going to start off with this flower trinket tray that I started. Unfortunately, she did crack straight down the middle when I tried to put a hole inside of it for the incense. So this is definitely a sculpting 101 tip. So I would recommend that if you're going to be making smaller pieces, kind of like what I'm doing here, that you make them a fair thickness so that they don't break on you while they're drying. That's definitely one of the most time-consuming processes of this experience, was waiting for your pieces to dry and making sure that you're checking on them so they don't crack down the middle. So if you notice that there's a crack starting to form in your clay piece, you can take a little bit of that clay and water mixture and take a small piece of clay, press it into the crack, let it dry, and it should seal up fully and build more structure. After that one flower, I haven't had any of my other pieces crack on me, so I definitely think that I'm learning. So my first step for making this ravioli spoon holder is to build up the thickness. So in order to do that, I just kept adding on layers of clay until I was happy, and then I cut out the shape. The shape does not have to be perfect. I definitely molded it a little bit better after it dried down, which is another hack, is that you can fix your shape later on in the process. You just do want to focus on building a stable piece. One thing I would recommend is that if you're going to be sculpting the clay on a flat surface, that you just place some barrier in between. So maybe like a silicone mat, or in my case, you can just use a cardboard box. You can cut off a piece. That just makes it easier for you to move your piece around, and it also prevents the clay from sticking to any fabric, which is really hard to get off. Just for my preferences, if we can minimize the mess, I will try to do that. Once I was happy with my shape, I actually pressed my thumb inside of the center to make like an indent where my spoon can rest. I also did use a spoon for reference just to make sure that it would actually lay flat on there. Once I was happy with it, I dipped my fingers into some of that mixture and some water, and then I went around and smoothed the surface of it until I liked the final shape. The packaging for the air dry clay says to give your piece 2 to 3 days to dry completely before you start painting it or adding UV resin to seal it. And I honestly agree with that. And this is because since it's air dry clay, if it's not fully dry, further down the line it'll start cracking and disintegrate. Not that these pieces are meant to last forever, but I do want to preserve my art and start collecting them. Once you're done sculpting your piece and letting it completely dry, now it's time to sand down each piece. I personally think that this step is optional, but if you want your piece to be smooth, you should sand down your piece. Now, I used to do nails at home, so I do have a lot of like sanding pieces that are specifically made for your nails that I used on my clay pieces. They worked out perfectly fine. I think like Home Depot sells little like sanding papers that you can use that are made for things like this. So I decided to redo the flower completely and make a hibiscus flower instead. I made it a lot bigger because I wanted to challenge myself, and I used a different technique this time. So I cut out the shape instead of using like 4 or 5 small little balls to make a flower, and this definitely made my trinket tray a lot more stable, and I think it looked a lot better than what I originally started with. So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise that the first piece didn't work out. The back of these pieces are none of my business. It does look a little bit bumpy and ridgy, but honestly, once it gets sealed over with the resin, the underside is pretty smooth, but I'm not too worried about that. Also, you might notice that I start off this video with nails, and by the end of it, I don't have any. This is such a fun activity. It brings me back to my childhood for some reason, even though I've never officially taken like a pottery class. I would definitely want to do something like that in my adulthood, maybe create some ceramic pieces. This is literally just the start of something huge. This hobby is definitely time consuming, but so rewarding. I definitely think that the more time and love you pour into your piece, the better it'll come out. And coming from somebody who's a perfectionist, if I can take as long as I want to make it as great as I can possibly make it, I'm going to spend that time. Even these little trinket trays that I made did take some time because I just wanted to make sure that the circle was completely, symmetrical, or that this actually looked like a flower or a moon. This is also a really fun hobby for people that are really serious about their craft. I mean, you get to literally come up with any idea that you want. All right, so these are the pieces that we are starting with. Moving on to my favorite part, which is painting. This is where I feel like your piece can really transform, and depending on the level of artiste that you are, you could probably make these look even more hyper realistic, but I wanted, just a fun, simple cartoon look. Shout out to Dollar Tree for having a lot of these mini packages. I got this brush set from there, and the paints. I chose like 6, 7 to 8 different colors from the store, and then I mix some of those to create like a gradient. When you're choosing colors, just remember they might look different after you glaze them with resin and they dry fully. So I definitely got to have a lot of fun with that process. This was my first ever piece that I made out of the air dry clay, and I thought it was so fitting to make a paint tray sculpted by hand, fit perfectly into my hand. So that's what I'll be using to paint my pieces today. I think that everything in life teaches you a lesson, and this hobby definitely taught me a level of patience that I really truly didn't understand. You know that saying that something feels like you're watching paint dry? Like it's just like painfully long. I completely understand that with this process, especially with the painting section of air dry clay. I think it's really great to work in smaller layers of paint so that you're letting it dry. If you want to build up the color, you should let the first layer dry before going over it. And I had a hard time doing that, so some of my pieces, like the colors bled into one another, having to wait, half the day for the paint to dry. I definitely struggled with a little bit because I was just so excited to see what the final product would look like. So my patience was definitely tested a little bit, but I'm so proud of everything I made. And I even made pieces for my sisters later down the line, and they love them. It is definitely one of my favorite hobbies now, officially. It's the most rewarding, and I think that my sculpting skills have definitely leveled up. So I'm definitely learning to be more present in the moment. Little things like this with my hobbies definitely teach me that. Instead of trying to rush the drying process or rush the sculpting process, I'm trying to be more present in it and enjoy the moment while I'm in it, because all we have is right now. The future is not guaranteed. You can't change the past. Express gratitude and your perspective will change completely. And that is definitely something that I got to practice with this hobby. I got this set of dual tip markers. They're water-based ink and they're really great for clay pieces. So I used acrylic paint on the base layer, and then I went over some of the pieces with some of these markers just to add some depth and little details. So these are really cool because they're dual-ended. One side is wider and then the other side is a fine tip, so you can add smaller details or blend with the larger tip. And I specifically got this set because there was a gold and silver pen, so I got to add some stars to my moon, crescent, like incense holder, trinket tray situation. I love how I was able to put 3 different uses into one piece, which is also what's so fun about crafting, is that you can make whatever your heart desires. You should be painting one of your clay pieces while the other one dries, just so you have one painting session or you're doing one layer at a time, as opposed to working on one clay piece every day. I definitely think you should be doing multiple at once if you can fit it into one session. If you're going to use the ink-based markers, you should definitely wait for your base layer to dry fully. Otherwise, you're going to get some bleeding of your colors together, and the final look is just going to be a little bit muddy. If that's the look you're going for, by all means, but I definitely think if you want a cleaner version of your paints, you should definitely wait for each layer to dry. Once all of your paint layers are completely dry, you can leave your piece as it is, or you can move on to the sealing process. I decided to use UV resin for a majority of these pieces, but if you're going to make something a lot smaller, you can use clear acrylic spray. I'll have it linked for you guys, but I use this a lot for my jewelry so that it doesn't get like wet or tarnished over time. I think that the spray option is definitely more beginner friendly. I already own a nail lamp that has UV lights, which is what you need if you're going to be using UV resin. Use it at your own risk, but I just love the finish that this gave all my pieces. It almost looks like ceramic, and it has that smooth finish, so I decided to seal all of my pieces with this. Also, just a disclaimer, you should definitely be using nitrile gloves if you're going to be using UV resin. I decided to put my pieces down on a piece of cardboard and just paint the resin onto the piece from there to avoid it touching my fingers. Still be cautious with whatever method you're going to be using because UV resin is toxic. So again, I wouldn't recommend for like beginners, but if you are interested in sealing and making it have that like fun, smooth finish, this is definitely the way to get there. I would just definitely recommend using some sort of barrier like a cardboard, something that you can move around so that you can also put your piece into the nail lamp to seal it more easily. Another tip that I have for using UV resin is to seal it in small layers. From my opinion, it takes about 5 minutes in the nail lamp for the piece to be completely cured. It may sound a little complicated, but curing is essentially making sure that your product is dry and not sticky. So with nails, that's why when you use gel, you want to make sure your gel is hardened and not sticky. It's even more toxic and dangerous if it stays uncured. So you really want to make sure that whatever you're using is completely dry. So in my case, when I'm using the resin, I know it's dry when it's hard and it doesn't feel sticky anymore. So you should definitely cure in smaller layers. The resin that I'm using claims that it makes the piece waterproof. I did have an incident where the crescent moon got a little bit wet and the paint started to bleed. So please make sure that you're sealing every corner of your piece. That is something that I had a learning curve with. I just want to be a testament that nothing changes if nothing changes. I've never been the one to wait for an opportunity to find me. I'm constantly looking for the next adventure. So I wanted to feel that spark again that I had lost for some time. So just out of pure curiosity, I started this series so I could have a space where I could test out new things, see what resonates with me, and I'm so happy to say that I found something that changed my perspective, something that I just enjoy. There's no need for pressure. It doesn't need to be perfect. I can simply just grow with it. I'm already collecting my pieces. I need to find a way to display them. It's one thing to be pushed out of your comfort zone, but it's another thing to find something that you're truly passionate about that brings you joy and also comfort at the same time. I'm so happy with the way that these pieces turned out. This hibiscus trinket tray is my favorite. I love it because the petals kind of act as a divider so you can separate your jewelry from your hair pieces. Like, it's just so cute. I'm so proud of it. I love how realistic the food pieces look like. I could literally just eat it up. Yum, yum, yum. I would definitely recommend that you guys give it a try. Let me know which piece you like the most. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye! Mwah.